Hi everyone, welcome back to Pretty in Punk, the punk rock podcast. I'm your host Fiona, your girly girl guide to the world of punk and rock music. Now, I don't know if anyone else has been picking up on this, but Australia has been killing it with the punk music game in the past few years. Recently, I've been seeing so many great punk bands coming out of Australia, and today I want to talk about a few that you must listen to if you are a punk music fan. First and foremost, let's talk about a super brief history of the punk music scene in Australia. Now, like the punk scenes in the US and the UK, the Australian punk scene also emerged in the 1970s. However, they really started to form their own distinct sound. One of the earliest and definitely one of the most influential bands from Australia in this scene is known as the Radio Birdmen, and they were formed in 1974, and they kind of had this fusion of like Detroit rock and punk influences. And quickly after that, punk bands from Australia even started to have more international success with bands like The Saints, whose single I'm Stranded became an international hit. And their level of success started putting Australia more on the map as punk pioneers. As the scene started to grow more and more, cities like Sydney and Melbourne quickly became hubs of punk venues. Venues like the Oxford Funhouse and Sydney's Grand Hotel quickly became places where punk bands would get their starts in Australia. And by the 1980s, Australia was really forming their own punk culture and had these emerging subgenres and bands like the Hard-Ons and the Cosmic Psychos, who I actually had a chance to see last year. Overall, though, most people think of the US and the UK as the true pioneers of punk, I think that Australia is also to thank for the whole globalization of this genre. That is just a super brief history, as this isn't a history episode, but now I want to flash forward into today's modern punk scene in Australia. Currently, Australia's punk scene is really thriving with a mix of newer and also previously established bands that are really making waves both in their own country and around the world. We have bands like Amyl and The Sniffers, who I've been seeing just like blowing up recently, and I've been hearing a lot about them as of late, plus a bunch of local venues in Australia such as the Tote in Melbourne and the Crowbar in Sydney are great places that are really thriving in the punk and DIY scene. Lyrically, bands from Australia seem to be focusing a lot on social issues as well, such as climate change and social justice as a whole. And with an increased focus on these lyrical themes, Australia is just embodying what punk really is. But today, in particular, I want to talk about some bands that you really need to listen to hailing from down under. Let's start off with Queensland's own The Chats. Now, I first heard their song Smoko back in senior year of high school. I just stumbled upon the music video on YouTube, decided to click on it, and I just loved like the DIY aesthetic that they had going on, and I loved just how like unserious it was, and it quickly became one of my favorite songs when I was like 17 years old. I also had an opportunity to see them about a year ago now. Actually, I think it was just a year ago. I think I saw like memories from it pop up on Instagram and Snapchat and all that, but they were sick live, and it was great to see a band from Australia getting such incredible recognition in the US. The Chats are known for their very catchy and almost humorous songs. They blend this sense of humor with this like classic punk attitude. And this breakout song, Smoko, that I was just talking about, definitely put them on the map and introduced them to a more global audience. However, even though they've been having such a great success both in their own country and internationally, they're still staying true to their DIY punk, garage punk roots. I would say the Chats kind of represent the more like working class pub centric side of Australia. They just capture everyday life in a very raw and a very relatable way. A lot of their songs just have these universal lyrics that anyone can relate to. I mean, whether it's a song about like getting food at the pub or spending all of your bus money, they have a song that you can relate to or even just laugh at. Although they have this great success recently, they have built their success on just not taking themselves too seriously, and they have this perfect blend of humor and just relatability while also staying true to the punk aesthetic. And a significant part of the chats is how they stay true to their Australian roots. For example, the song Smoko is a slang term for a smoke break in Australian slang, and Pub Feed just celebrates this tradition of going to the pub. As I said earlier, despite this global success, they have stayed true to their roots, their punk roots, and that is something that a lot of bands honestly struggle with their rise to fame, but they have stayed authentic and true to themselves since day one. I mean, they just have this very unapologetic punk attitude, but they also handle taking care of their own promotions and their own music videos as well. They're just the most DIY punk music videos ever, and I love that. I love that it's not super polished because it's honestly refreshing. Their music is just as good and just as raw and DIY as it was when I first heard them, and even their music now still stays true to that. Like many punk bands, the Chats are known for their super fast, stripped down, just raw music, and I love that. Like, they just have this very reminiscent sound of classic old school punk. And like a lot of those old school classic punk songs, a lot of the songs clock in at under 2 minutes. I would say that the vocalist Amyl, like his vocals are really what makes the Chats stand out, because first of all, he has a super thick Australian accent. Like, he doesn't try to affect it or hide it away. Like, he stays true to what his accent is when he sings. And sometimes his vocals are almost like he's just talking or like shouting at you as well. I would say his vocal style leans to the more conversational tone, very deadpan, and again, not taking himself too seriously. When you listen to their music, it's almost as if he's talking to you, sharing his frustrations, or just having some funny, friendly banter. Their sound is equal parts nostalgic as it is refreshing, because it's not like a lot of bands that you are hearing today, but it is very reminiscent of bands that came from the 1970s, 1980s punk scene. And as I've been saying with their humor, that is really what sets the Chats apart, is their ability to just laugh at themselves while delivering these high energy punk performances. It just makes them more relatable in an industry that honestly these days takes itself a little too seriously. Overall though, the Chats have managed to stake their unique claim in the punk scene as of today, mixing their DIY ethics, their Australian culture, and also their humor. They've proven that a band can be true to themselves and not sacrifice who they are and still be wildly successful. Now, I should mention too, real quick, for my Song of the Week playlist, normally I do pick one song each week, but since I'm highlighting multiple bands that I really want you guys to listen to, I'm picking a song from each band. You can find my Song of the Week playlist on Spotify. It'll be linked in the show notes if you're listening, or in the YouTube description if you are watching on video. And the song that I've chosen from the Chats is called 6 Liter GTR, and it is off of their latest album from 2022 called Get Effed. Not going to say the actual name because YouTube can be funny sometimes with those things, but you get the picture. But anyway, if you are a fan of that old school classic punk DIY sound, the Chats are for you, and I really urge you to check them out. Next up, let's talk about a name you might have been hearing, Amyl and The Sniffers. As of recently, I've been seeing their name everywhere. I've been seeing their pictures everywhere. On TikTok, I've been seeing them. I feel like they're really, really blowing up. I mean, they already almost have 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. I think they're at like 900K right now. So they are really blowing up. Now, Amyl and The Sniffers is a truly explosive punk band from Melbourne, Australia. Frontwoman Amy Taylor is incredible. She just has this truly like magnetic stage presence and this energy that just feeds onto you. Her stage presence and her onstage persona has really what has helped the band's success. I mean, of course they all have, but I think she really grabs your attention right away. She has this fierce energy, this awesome hair, and just really unapologetic but also aggressive vocals. She has this level of confidence that is just so captivating. They have this blend of punk rock and pub rock that really sets them apart in the global punk sphere as a whole. Of course, they clearly take inspiration from these classic punk bands with their, their guitar tones and their fast tempos and the rebellious spirit that they have going on, but they do it in a way that is just so refreshing. They do it in a way that also incorporates like the modern punk scene as well. So I think because of that, their sound as a whole is very accessible to both old school punk fans and new punk fans alike. I would say after listening to their music for a little bit, empowerment is definitely a huge theme in their lyrics. A lot of their songs address themes of like independence, self-worth, and taking control of your own destiny and your own life. And the sense of empowerment is not only present in the sound of their music, but also their performances. I mean, as a whole, of course, Amy Taylor's stage presence is just unmatched, but as a whole, all of them have this energy that is just intense, in your face, and really holds true to that punk spirit. They have this perfect blend of empowerment and aggression, and they really show that these two things can coexist. Amy Taylor's vocal delivery is very aggressive, very in your face, and it is also kind of conversational as well. And she also has this very distinct Australian accent too that just really makes her stand out in the music industry and the punk industry alike. The guitar tones are super aggressive, super in your face, and really hold true to that classic punk aesthetic as well, and they complement the vocals perfectly. And meanwhile, the awesome rhythm section, they keep the band's sound super tight and super forceful and powerful. Ultimately though, Amyl and The Sniffers just thrives on that raw energy, that punk aggression and empowerment, all of which are just delivered through this like hard-hitting stage presence that is just unmatched. By blending these classic punk roots with the pub rock roots, they have created this sound that is equal parts familiar and refreshing. They are just a band that refuses to hold back, and I cannot wait to see where they go from here, and I really, really hope I get to see them live because I just feel like that would be the craziest, most fun show ever, and I need to experience that. And my song of the week that I have been loving from them that I really want you to listen to is called Chewing Gum. That will be on my song of the week playlist, and I think everything that I've kind of described, this song encapsulates that perfectly. Now, for this next band. If the name of this band alone doesn't make you want to listen to them, I don't know what will, but you gotta check out Stiff Richards. Yes, that is their name. However, Stiff Richards is a band that has quickly made a name for themselves within Australia's punk and DIY community. They just have this raw, unfiltered sound that transports you back to punk's early days. They kind of have this like no frills approach to this music that is very, very reminiscent of old school punk from the 70s and 80s. And I love that. I am so here for that. One of the defining aspects of this band is their deep connection to Australia's underground music scene. They emerged from Melbourne, and the band has become such a staple in the underground scene in Australia, performing at a lot of local clubs and pubs. They have definitely created a dedicated following because they stay true to what punk is. They kind of reject like the mainstream trends of rock music, and they stay true to what punk truly is and the rawness of this genre. As I said, their overall sound is just very reminiscent of the classic punk bands that I love and that a lot of punk fans still listen to this day. They have those really fast-paced guitar riffs, just a lot of like downstrokes, fast-paced strumming. The vocals are just very gritty, very in your face, and not too polished, which I mean that as a compliment because that is what I love when I am looking for a new band to listen to in the punk realm. This band just transports you back to the classic punk days. I mean, I say that as someone who was born in 2000, but as someone whose favorite genre of music is punk, and I really appreciate the older DIY, old school punk, this band makes me feel like I am in that era and I'm transported back in time. Even the production element is just so straightforward. Like, it's not a lot, like I said earlier, it's not a lot of like frills. It's not overdone. It's just raw and authentic and kind of has this modern like DIY punk feel to it. Overall, Stiff Richards is just a band that stays true to what it means to be a punk band. It's fast and loud and unapologetic. They've managed to create a sound that honors the classic punk bands that they seem to be so inspired by musically, but also embraces the newer punk scene in Australia and the world as a whole. I think because of this just classic raw punk sound, they've really become one of the most exciting bands to come out of Australia, and I love that. You know, for a genre of music that a lot of people say is dead, I think that Stiff Richards really proves that it's not, that the punk music scene is still thriving and alive by staying true to the classic punk roots. And my song of the week from them is called Bad Disease. From the get-go with this song, from the opening guitar riff, you will know exactly what I mean by staying true to those classic punk roots. Overall, in today's modern times, Australia is killing the punk game. I mean, we have so many incredible bands. We have the Chats, Amyl and The Sniffers, Stiff Richards, just to name a few. Those are my three personal favorites. And Australia is just producing these bands that are staying true to this classic punk sound while also embracing like the current rock music scene as a whole. And it just proves that you can stick to these classic punk roots while still making a name for yourself. And that just makes me so happy as someone who just knows deep down that punk will never die. I am so happy that so many Australian bands are really keeping the scene and this genre alive. And I can't wait to see more bands that come out of Australia and what these bands do in the span of their careers. I'm just so excited to see where this goes. And I have seen the Chats live, but I'm really hoping to see some other Australian bands live as well. These bands just capture that raw aggressiveness of punk. They stay true to that punk sound, and I love that. From the 1970s to now, Australia's vibrant punk scene remains as dynamic and as influential as ever, and it showcases that this punk sound and this punk attitude is still as relevant today as it was in the 1970s when punk first got its start. If there is one country that is keeping this genre of music alive, it is Australia. So everyone, this brings us to the end of this week's episode of Pretty in Punk, but I have just had a blast researching these punk bands from Australia and Australia's punk scene as a whole. And again, I'm so excited to see where it goes. To end out this episode, I want to let you guys know where you can find me. As per my sign, at Pretty in Punk Pod on TikTok and Instagram. I am on all streaming platforms, Pretty in Punk, the punk rock podcast, and YouTube as well. The same name if you want to watch your podcasts. And my Song of the Week playlist will be listed below in the show notes or the YouTube description. And again, that is on Spotify, so feel free to check that out. Listen to all three songs. But for now, I do post new episodes every Friday, so I will see you in the next episode.